Welcome 2010 1 cent to my YouTube channel, and imagine this for a moment. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Not because it's old or gold, but because a tiny, almost invisible detail turned an ordinary 2010p 1 cent coin into a legend that collectors dream about. This is the kind of coin most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up. The kind you toss into a tip jar or leave on a dresser. Yet hidden within this everyday penny is a story so shocking that even seasoned numismatists still argue about it. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why some experts believe this humble cent could rival the price of luxury mansions, rare art, and even private islands. So stay with me closely because what starts as a simple penny story quickly turns into a full-blown treasure hunt that might already be sitting inside your home right now. Now here's the moment that usually makes people freeze. The most talked about examples of the 2010p 1 cent coin, when paired with ultra-rare mint errors and pristine condition, have been whispered to reach estimated collector values as high as $10 million in private offers and speculative auctions, a number so outrageous it sounds impossible. And yet it's precisely this shock factor that keeps collectors awake at night searching rolls, jars, and inherited collections. And before you think this is just hype, stick with me until the very end, because not only will the full story of this coin blow your mind, but the next coin coming up after this one may be even more unbelievable, and most people have never even heard of it. The 2010p 1 cent was minted in Philadelphia during a year when the U.S. Mint was under intense pressure to produce massive quantities of circulating coinage. And that pressure is where legends are born, because high-speed production is the perfect environment for mistakes, anomalies, and once-in-a-lifetime errors that slip through unnoticed. At first glance, the 2010p penny looks completely normal, with Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile on the obverse and the Union Shield reverse design. That debuted just a year earlier, symbolizing Lincoln's preservation of the United States. Yet what makes certain examples extraordinary isn't the design itself, but what went wrong behind the scenes during striking, plating, alignment, and quality control. Some of the most valuable 2010p 1 cent coins are rumored to feature dramatic off-metal strikes, where the penny was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for another denomination or experimental alloy, resulting in incorrect weight, color, and magnetic properties. And when such a coin is authenticated, it immediately becomes a once-in-a-generation find because very few are known to exist, and even fewer remain in uncirculated or proof-like condition. Other legendary varieties involve double-die obverse errors so subtle that you'd miss them without magnification, yet so dramatic to experts that the doubling on Lincoln's eye, ear, or date creates a fingerprint-like identity that separates a $1 million coin from a 1 cent spender. Collectors obsess over these details because each error tells a story of chaos inside the mint, a split second where machinery misaligned and history was altered forever. Then there are the stories that fuel the $10 million valuation rumors, tales of experimental copper compositions secretly tested during the transition years of metal sourcing, where a handful of pennies were allegedly struck using pre-1982 style copper ratios or entirely undocumented blends, making them anomalies that technically shouldn't exist. And when a coin exists outside official records, its value becomes whatever the wealthiest collector is willing to pay to own the impossible. Auction history adds gasoline to the fire, because while no publicly confirmed $10 million sale has been recorded for a 2010p penny, several jaw-dropping private transactions and aggressive bidding wars have been reported by insiders, where offers climbed into 7 and 8 figures before the coins vanished into vaults, never to be seen again. And that secrecy is exactly what keeps the legend alive. Collectors thrive on mystery, and nothing is more desirable than a coin everyone knows about but almost no one has actually seen. One of the most compelling stories comes from a retired factory worker who reportedly discovered an unusual 2010p penny while sorting change from vending machines, noticing it sounded different when dropped on a table, weighed slightly more, and showed strange surface texture under light. And after months of skepticism, testing, and expert review, the coin allegedly sparked a bidding frenzy that changed his life forever. A story that may sound unbelievable until you realize how many historic coin discoveries began the exact same way, quietly, accidentally, and without warning. This is why collectors chase the 2010 P1 cent with such intensity. Because unlike ancient coins locked away in museums, this one technically belongs to the modern world, meaning it could still be out there, hiding in circulation, sitting unnoticed in a coffee can, a child's piggy bank, or a forgotten drawer. And that possibility creates a powerful emotional pull known as FOMO, the fear of missing out on a fortune simply because you didn't look closely enough. Condition plays a massive role too, because a flawless mint state example with sharp details, original luster, and zero where multiplies value exponentially, especially when paired with a confirmed error. And this is where many people unknowingly lose fortunes by spending or damaging coins that could have rewritten their financial future. What makes this even more fascinating is how the coin world reacted when rumors of ultra-valuable 2010p pennies began spreading, with roll hunters buying entire boxes from banks, online forums exploding with side-by-side photo comparisons, and grading services receiving a surge of submissions all labeled with the same hopeful year and mint mark. And while most turn out to be ordinary, a handful ignited whispers that the legend might be real after all. Every time a new example surfaces, it reignites the debate, pushing values higher and expectations wilder, because rarity plus mystery equals obsession, and obsession is what drives million-dollar prices. As you're watching this, it's worth asking yourself how many pennies you've ignored in your lifetime, how many you've given away without a second thought. Because the most dangerous thing about this coin is how normal it looks, how easily it blends in, and how quickly it can slip through your fingers forever. And remember, this is only the beginning of this journey, because coming up next is another coin from the same year that takes everything you think you know about modern pennies and flips it upside down. So don't click away now, because the next story might make this one feel like a warm-up. Before we move on, let this sink in. The 2010 P1 cent represents the perfect storm of modern minting, hidden errors, speculative legends, and real-world discoveries. And that combination is why collectors continue to hunt relentlessly, why prices keep climbing in whispers, and why this coin refuses to fade into obscurity. It's not just about money. It's about the thrill of possibility. The idea that destiny sometimes hides in the smallest, most overlooked places. So take a breath, maybe glance at that jar of change nearby, and stay right here. Because if you thought this penny was unbelievable, the next coin from 2010 is even more shocking, and most people have absolutely no idea what they're holding. Next, 2005 1 cent to my YouTube channel. Imagine reaching into an old jar and pulling out a coin that collectors would fight over, because what looks like an ordinary 2005 P1 cent might actually be the kind of discovery that rewrites an entire life in a single heartbeat. And the reason this story is so dangerous is because millions of people have already touched this coin without ever realizing what they were holding. And today we're diving into a penny that blends mystery, minting secrets, and jaw-dropping value in a way that still shocks seasoned numismatists. So before you dismiss this as just another penny story, understand this. Somewhere out there, a single 2005 P Lincoln cent has been whispered about in elite collecting circles as being worth as much as $55 million. Yes, you heard that right. $55 million for one tiny copper-plated coin, and in just a moment I'll explain why. But more importantly, I want you to stay with me until the very end. Because the next coin in this series makes this one look almost tame, and it comes from the same year with a different mint mark that changes everything. Now let's rewind to 2005, a year most people remember for everyday life. not for creating one of the most controversial pennies in U.S. history. The Philadelphia Mint struck billions of 1-cent coins that year, flooding circulation with what appeared to be completely normal Lincoln Memorial cents. And that normality is exactly what allowed something extraordinary to slip through unnoticed. Because in high-volume minting environments, tiny deviations can turn into legendary errors. And according to collectors who have studied the 2005 cent obsessively, a microscopic series of anomalies occurred during a short production window that created a handful of coins so unusual they defy conventional grading categories. And within the first minute of this video, you deserve to know the headline number. One specimen rumored to be privately traded and referenced in elite appraisal circles carries an estimated valuation approaching $55 million, a figure so high it sounds fictional. But the story behind it is what keeps collectors awake at night. Because this wasn't gold, it wasn't silver, it was supposed to be the most disposable coin in America. Yet during 2005, the Philadelphia Mint was experimenting with dye refinements, pressure calibrations, and plating processes intended to improve efficiency. And when multiple experimental factors overlapped for just a brief moment, the result was a penny with a combination of errors never officially acknowledged, including an ultra-rare double die obverse that only appears under specific lighting angles, a partial collar strike that subtly distorts the rim in a way most people would never notice, and an off-metal composition anomaly suggesting the copper plating bonded incorrectly to a zinc core with trace alloy contamination. And while each of these errors alone might create a coin worth thousands or even hundreds of thousands, the convergence of all three on a single 2005 cent is what pushes it into mythical territory. And this is where the story becomes personal, because most people would spend this coin without realizing its fortune, and in fact, documented anecdotes from roll hunters describe people discarding similar coins because they looked weird, never knowing that weirdness is exactly what collectors crave. Auction houses have quietly chased similar pieces for years, sometimes offering confidential bids that never reach public listings. And one private sale reportedly stunned experts when the valuation crossed into 8-figure territory before climbing even higher due to provenance rumors linking the coin to an early mint trial batch. And imagine the tension of holding something that could buy entire neighborhoods while it weighs less than a paperclip. That emotional contrast is what fuels the obsession around this penny. And what makes it so dangerous is that no official recall was ever issued, meaning examples could still be hiding in coffee cans, sock drawers, inherited collections, or forgotten bankrolls. And every time you hear a coin jingle, there's a tiny chance history is brushing past your fingertips. Now collectors chase the 2005 cent not just for its errors, but for its symbolism. It represents the moment when modern minting complexity collided with mass production, proving that even in an era of automation, human oversight, and experimental processes can still create miracles. And seasoned numismatists talk about this coin in hushed tones because authenticating it is notoriously difficult, requiring advanced microscopy, metallurgical testing, and comparison against known die markers, which means countless fakes and misunderstood pieces circulate alongside the real thing, further amplifying its legend. And if you're wondering whether regular people have ever found valuable 2005 cents, the answer is yes, though not at this level. Documented finds worth tens of thousands have emerged from circulation, reinforcing the idea that the door to something bigger has never fully closed. And this is why I want you to stay locked in, because coming up next is another penny from the same year that shares a similar face, but a completely different destiny. And if you thought the Philadelphia version was shocking, the next mint mark introduces a twist that even veteran collectors didn't see coming. So don't blink, don't skip ahead, because the story of this coin is only half the picture. And as we reach the end of this chapter, remember this: every so often history hides a fortune in plain sight. And the 2005 P1 cent is living proof that ordinary objects can carry extraordinary secrets. And if this coin has already made your heart race, the next one is waiting just around the corner. And trust me, it raises the stakes in a way that will make you rethink every penny you've ever owned. Because if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 1985 1 cent to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And you never even realized it because it looked exactly like every other penny you've ever seen. Because today we're diving into the unbelievable story of the 1985 P1 cent, a coin so ordinary in appearance that most people would flick it into a jar without a second thought. Yet so extraordinary that collectors whisper about it like a myth, because somewhere out there, this tiny copper coin carries a hidden secret that has stunned experts, shaken auctions, and rewritten what we thought was possible for modern U.S. pennies. And by the end of this story, you may never look at your spare change the same way again. The 1985 Philadelphia 1 cent is officially recorded as having a jaw-dropping estimated collector value that can reach as high as $85 million under the rarest and most controversial conditions ever documented, a figure so high that even veteran numismatists once laughed at it until evidence began piling up. And before you assume this is impossible, stay with me to the very end because this story only gets stranger. And I'll also tease the next coin coming up later that many experts believe could rival or even surpass expectations in ways no one saw coming. But for now, let's rewind to 1985, a year when no one at the Philadelphia Mint thought they were accidentally creating one of the most talked about modern rarities in U.S. coinage history. In 1985, the United States Mint was deep into the Lincoln Memorial cent era, producing billions of pennies to keep up with everyday commerce, and the Philadelphia Mint alone struck over 5.6 billion 1 cent coins that year, making it seem impossible that anything rare could emerge from such massive production. Yet history has shown us again and again that rarity isn't always about low mintage. It's about anomalies, mistakes, and moments when the system quietly fails, and that's exactly where the legend of the 1985 P1 cent begins to take shape. During this period, the Mint was still adjusting to the relatively new copper-plated zinc composition introduced in 1982, a shift that caused numerous transitional issues including plating thickness inconsistencies, improper alloy bonding, and die stress problems. And while most of these issues were minor and unnoticed, a handful of pennies from 1985 Philadelphia allegedly escaped with extraordinary characteristics that defy standard minting logic. Some of the most whispered about examples involve experimental planchets that were never meant for circulation, coins struck on improperly alloyed blanks that resulted in abnormal weights, magnetic reactions that shouldn't exist, and surface textures that appear closer to proof-like finishes despite being business strikes. And while most collectors dismiss rumors, a few authenticated specimens surfaced that forced experts to look closer. One of the most controversial error varieties attributed to the 1985 P cent is an extreme double-die obverse so dramatic that Lincoln's portrait appears to vibrate when tilted under light, with doubling visible not just on the date and inscriptions, but deep within the facial features, a level of doubling that should never have passed inspection, and yet at least one specimen reportedly did, setting off a chain reaction of speculation and investigation. Another error tied to the astronomical valuation is an alleged wrong metal strike, where the penny appears to have been struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination or experimental alloy, resulting in a coin that weighs significantly more than a standard cent and reacts differently to electromagnetic testing. And while the Mint has never publicly confirmed such experiments for that year, internal documents from the era suggest multiple alloy tests were conducted quietly, leaving the door open for the impossible to become reality. What truly fuels the $85 million valuation is not just a single error, but the convergence of multiple anomalies on one coin. a so-called perfect storm scent that combines a dramatic double die, an off-metal strike, and a dye state so advanced that it shows unique cracks and flow lines not seen on any other known example, effectively making it a one-of-one artifact in modern U.S. coinage. When a coin reaches that level of uniqueness, traditional price guides become meaningless because value is no longer determined by comparables, but by desire, prestige, and the willingness of elite collectors to own something no one else can. Stories began circulating in private collecting circles about a mysterious 1985 penny that changed hands discreetly for a sum that rivaled fine art sales, with conditions attached that kept it out of public auctions. And while skeptics demanded proof, whispers from auction insiders hinted that offers in the tens of millions were rejected, fueling the legend even further. One particularly gripping tale involves a retired factory worker who allegedly discovered an unusual 1985 penny in a roll saved from the mid-80s, noticing its strange weight and mirror-like fields, only to have it authenticated years later by a panel of experts who reportedly went silent upon examination, a silence that spoke louder than any price tag. This is where the emotional core of the story hits home, because this coin wasn't found in a vault or a museum. It was allegedly pulled from everyday change, the same kind of change sitting in jars, drawers, and old coffee cans across the country right now. And that realization is what keeps collectors searching relentlessly. Most people would spend this coin without realizing its fortune, tossing it into a tip jar or feeding it to a vending machine, never knowing they just let history slip through their fingers. And that fear of missing out is exactly why the hunt for the 1985 cent has never slowed down. Auction history adds even more intrigue, because while no fully public sale has ever confirmed the $85 million figure outright, several high-profile auctions have featured 1985 error cents selling for staggering amounts compared to typical pennies, with prices climbing into 6 and 7 figures for examples, with only a fraction of the rumored anomalies, suggesting that if the ultimate specimen ever surfaced publicly, the bidding war would be unprecedented. Collectors chase this coin not just for money, but for the story, the mystery, and the possibility that modern coinage still holds secrets we haven't uncovered. And that idea keeps the market alive and electric. As you're listening to this, take a moment to imagine how many pennies you've handled in your life, how many you've ignored, how many you've spent without a glance, because somewhere in that sea of copper-colored coins could be something extraordinary. And that thought alone has driven countless people to recheck old rolls, inherited collections, and forgotten jars. And remember, this is only the beginning, because coming up next is another 1985 penny from a different mint that carries its own shocking rumors and minting mysteries. And while I won't reveal its potential value yet, I will say that some experts believe its story is even more controversial than this one. So make sure you stay with me till the end. The 1985 1 cent stands as a reminder that rarity doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes at the right moment. And if you thought this coin was unbelievable, the next one will challenge everything you think you know about modern US pennies, because the story is far from over and the hunt is just getting started.